All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of Off the Grid. I wanted to welcome our next guest. She's an award-winning poet, community activist, and educator. She's a founding member of the Asian American female spoken word poetry group Yellow Rage. She's one of the first Asian American women to appear on HBO's Russell Simmons Presents Deaf Poetry in the first live Deaf Poetry Jam show back in 2001. For over 20 years, she has graced the stages of so many distinguished venues around the country, to include the Kennedy Center, the Japanese American National Museum, and the Wingloop Museum of Asian Pacific American Experience. I wanted to welcome my guest, Michelle Myers, to the show. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for making the time. Yeah, I really appreciate it. I was really excited when you committed, and yeah, I wanted to get into it. I wanted to take it back real quick. Where were you born, and where did you grow up?
I was born in Seoul, South Korea. So
Hmm.
actually, yeah, so I'm biracial. So my father was American and he was white, and so he was in the Air Force and he
Right.
was stationed on a military base near Seoul. And so he met my mom while he was stationed in Korea
Yep.
and they got married. And then I was born on a military base in Seoul. And then my father was basically restationed back in the States. And I grew up in South Jersey, which is where he's from. He's
Okay.
from South Jersey. Yes. So that's where I grew up in South Jersey. So not that far from Philly. I guess where I grew up, what is about 30 minutes outside of Philly, but in New Jersey.
Were you? Do you recall the base name? Was it Yongsan?
Actually, I don't remember the name of the base. I'd have to go back and look,
Okay,
honestly.
that's awesome. Do you recall? Did you spend your first couple years in Seoul before moving back to the U.S.?
So we stayed in Seoul until I was about a year old, and then my
Okay.
father was stationed. So most of my Korean family still live in Korea. As
Yep.
far as Korean family in the States, I have my mom's older brother, my uncle, him and his family, they live here in
Okay.
California, but everybody else lives in Korea still.
Well, very cool. Well, shout out to your dad. Did some time in the U.S. Air Force. I
Thank
love it. I'm an Army guy, so
Oh,
yep, very
okay.
cool. Yeah, we just actually we moved back from Korea. We were there 2 years ago, and we're here now in Hawaii. So I'm stationed here in Hawaii. Well, good. Well, hey, tell me about how you were first exposed to poetry. How did that all go down?
Well, as far as how I was first exposed to spoken word poetry,
Mhm.
this was during the late 1990s, and I was in graduate school at the time. I was completing my master's degree at Temple University,
Okay.
and and I was pregnant with my oldest daughter. And there used to be this show that was on BET called Planet Group. I don't know if you remember that show, but there was a show called Planet Group. And they usually would, it's like a dance show, right? So they would have a musical guest and then they'd have people, they would show people dancing. That was a big thing in the 90s, right? Those dance shows. But
Okay.
there was this one time where instead of having a musical guest, they had spoken word poets. And the host of that show, her name was Rachel. And I remember that at the very opening of the show, the how it opened in that particular episode was Saul Williams.
Oh man.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's the first time that I had seen spoken word poetry performed. I had been involved in theater since I was in high school. So I had done some performing like theater as well as readers theater and
Okay.
I did some competitive debate I'm sorry, competitive speech type stuff when I was in high school and college. And I wrote poetry, but I never really thought about poetry as performance art. So that was the first time I had ever seen that. So on that show, I saw Saul Williams,
Wow.
I saw Mums the Poet, I saw Jessica Care Moore,
Yeah.
and there was something about it that was just so vibrant and just so full of life, so
Okay.
passionate. And like I said, I had never seen anything like that before. I became very inspired by that.
Yeah.
I started to write more spoken word poetry, but I kept it. it was for myself. It wasn't really anything that at that time I was thinking about sharing. And
Okay.
then I started to think about sharing it when I signed up for a writing and performance workshop at Asian Arts Initiative in Philadelphia. And that's actually where
Nice.
I met, that's where and when I met my poetry partner in Yellow Rage, Katsi Vilefan.
Yep.
And the facilitator of the workshop, his name is Gary San Angel.
Okay.
And so he's a really amazing Filipino American performance artist, came out of, well, he's originally from California, but he was in New York before he came to Philly, and then he was in Philly, and then he was leading workshops at Asian Arts Initiative.
Yeah.
So while I was in this workshop, I just I wanted to experiment and explore performance art through spoken word poetry, and Gary really encouraged me and gave me a very safe and supportive space. This was really the first time that I was in a predominantly Asian American space too,
Sure.
up until this point. And so it was just really something that I at that particular time in my life that I needed. And then also when I met Katsi was the one who introduced me to Asian American spoken word poets.
Okay.
So she introduced, because at that time I was still talking about Saul Williams and Jessica Care
Right.
Moore and other people, but African American spoken word poets at that time who were very inspirational to me.
Sure.
And she said there after one of our workshop sessions, she came up to me and she asked me if I had ever heard of I Was Born with Two Tongues.
Yeah. Oh man.
Said no.
Yeah.
And so then she was like, "Oh, you have to listen to their CD." So
Okay.
she gave me their CD, Broken Speak. And
Yeah.
so then I listened to that and it just kind of blew my mind because that was the first time that I had ever heard Asian Americans speak in a way where, first of all, where they spoke through anger and rage and did so unapologetically and talking about
Yeah.
things like social justice issues and racism and the sexual objectification and fetishization of Asian American women. And even though
Yeah.
these were all things that I had been talking about and you also part of my own personal experiences and so forth, this was the first time that I had ever heard other Asian Americans, especially Asian American artists, talking
Right.
about. So I was super inspired by them. That's actually how Cassie and I wrote our first collaboration piece together because our first poem that we ever wrote and performed together is called I'm a Woman Out of Flavor. And that was
Okay.
inspired by Not Your Fetish,
Right.
which, and Emily, right, wrote and performed on that CD. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of how it all started.
Okay. That's crazy. I have the timing in my head now. So Two Tongues was first, and then yeah, you guys heard that stuff. But yeah, funny enough, Saul Williams too was also my introduction to spoken word
Oh,
as
really?
well. Yeah, so he had this piece that I can't remember if the piece is called Clack Clack, but I know
Yeah.
that was like the main line. But again, just blew my mind. And then same thing. And then I found out about Two Tongues, and then I found out about y'all when I saw you guys on the show, and it was crazy. And what's interesting to me is in one space, I found your music was described as hip hop influenced rhyme, and so I was like, oh, I wonder if Michelle like tried rapping first, or and then it just kind of shaped the spoken word, or was that the other way around? Can you talk to me about what influenced your delivery? Because that's a big deal, the way that you deliver your rhymes, especially in spoken word, because you can hear it clearly. But what influenced the way deliver your pieces?
It's really interesting that you asked that question. Well, first of all, definitely hip hop has been a big influence in my life, right? So since
Yeah,
I was a young person, right, from the 1980s, I was one of those people in the early 1980s where I was listening to, the hip hop and R&B station out of Philly at that time was
yeah,
called Power 99, and I had my boom box and I was, recording like the top 9 at 9 on Power 99 FM, right? And I was, make my little mixtapes and stuff, right? And and I really did at that time. I did aspire to be an MC. I mean, I was a huge fan of.
oh,
I was a huge fan. This is in the 80s though, right? I was also a
yeah.
fan of Jackson and Prince. I really love their music too.
That's great.
Yeah, I would write my own little rhymes. And so I was actually a cheerleader. So in the 80s when I was in high school, I was a cheerleader.
Okay.
And so as a cheerleader, I actually was a part of our squad. We cheered for both the football team and for the basketball team. So we always also went to all their away games and stuff. And I was also the manager for the baseball team. And there was always some guy that was on the team that always thought that they were like this great uh, freestylist or whatever, right? And I always wanted to be like, I always wanted to go head to head with all these guys,
I love it.
like, practice my rhymes and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
then bus, I'd be like, oh, I want to get in on that, or whatever. And so then so I would have these little battles with some of the guys on the bus and stuff. So I kind of started with that. And then in the 1990s, as we are coming out of the 80s, Public Enemy was a big
Yeah.
transition,
Nice.
for me. But then getting into the 90s, I think that my biggest influences as far as hip hop is concerned were Tupac, Nas, Lauryn
Yeah.
Hill. I mean, I
Sure.
love the Fugees. I loved when she was with the Fugees too, but then when she broke off and did her own work, like The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, and when she did MTV
Yeah.
Unplugged, that's one of my favorite albums is MTV Unplugged. And of course, I definitely have a lot of influence, with as far as like Jay-Z and Biggie, all those folks out in
Yeah.
the 1990s. And so I think that as far as Katsy and I and some of our spoken word poetry and the way we deliver it, I have to
Yeah.
say because honestly, I think we both have different delivery styles depending upon the poem, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
I
Good point.
yeah, so I think that when people ask me about my process, one of the things that I do say is, or I truly believe in my heart, is that the poem tells me how it wants to be delivered. Do you know what I'm
Okay.
saying? I don't
Yeah.
necessarily, I don't, I, this is just my process. I can't speak for anybody else, but I don't necessarily go into writing a piece with this preconceived idea of how it's going to sound. I
Okay.
I I go with how I feel and then how the words come out
Yeah.
and then how the delivery seems to fit with what I've written. And it just so happens that when Katsy and I write our poems, which most of our group pieces do tend to be angry pieces,
Okay.
a lot of the angry pieces that I perform with Katsy want to be performed as hip hop influenced type
Yeah.
delivery
Sure.
styles. So that's how, but I also I want to clarify that Katsy and I have never called ourselves hip hop.
Okay.
Other people have called us hip hop. Like personally, this is what I've always said for over 20 years that
Yeah.
I have too much respect for MCs
Yeah.
to ever claim that I'm an actual MC. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So I am a spoken word poet, but I'm very much influenced by hip hop, and it does show up in the way that I deliver some of my poems and write some of my poems and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably some of the platforms that you performed at, and I'm like holding everything in me, trying not to ask you too much about Yellow Rage because I want to save that for a later time. But you know what I think you're really good at uh, is you have this package thing going on. Like for me, when I'm rapping, I know, when you read the line, it's like, okay, whatever. But the way that I deliver it, that I know that it hits. But for you, I think you're an excellent writer too. So even if I'm not hearing you say it, I'm like, dang. And I'm gonna talk about this brevity piece that I was like, man, she is something else. I mean, just that line for line was hitting. And so I think you're very good at that combination of being able to write. So if you read it, you can feel it, and then when you deliver it, it's times 10 more words in terms of like impact. It just hits a little harder. So props to you. I love it.
Well, thank you.
I wanted to talk to you about your TED Talk that you did at Jefferson University. Let Hearts Love, Let Hearts Live. Can you talk to me about how that opportunity came about?
That opportunity came about actually because the students who were coordinating that TED Talk were my students. So one of them came up to me, sought me out the semester after she had had me, and they were in the process, her and
Okay.
the other student that she was working with, they both had me in class. At
Yeah.
Jefferson university, I teach Asian American Studies in Immigrant America.
Okay.
And and so they had me, I believe, for Asian American Studies. And so they she came up to me after the next semester. She found me in one of my classes, and she said that she wanted to invite me to submit a proposal for the TED Talk.
Oh wow.
And yeah, so since she invited me, and I just, when my students ask me if I can do things for them or
Yeah.
whatever, I just feel they're almost like my kids, it's
Yeah.
hard for me to say no to my students. Sometimes
Yeah.
I think I'm too much of a softie when it comes to my students, but it's that's also a part of my passion is to,
Yeah.
help young people,
Yeah.
and find
Oh
their
man.
own voices and stuff. And so I was just really honored that they had thought of me and had sought me out to invite me to be a part of this TED Talk, and that they wanted me to be a part of this TED Talk. And so I
Yeah.
did come with, and they did also say that they hoped that in my proposal that I would share some of my spoken word poetry. And so
Yeah.
that's how that came about. I had to try to imagine what was the message that I really wanted to try to send through this TED Talk. And so that's basically how that whole opportunity came about for me to be a
Yeah.
part of that.
Can you tell me about the proposal process? Was it a video proposal, or did you just kind of summarize what you wanted to do? Was there a review board for that?
Yeah, so it was a multiple step process. So I think the
Okay.
first part of the process was just me. It was a very short video
Hmm.
application. So I guess they just wanted to see how for people who were interested in being part of the TED Talk, I think they just wanted to see how they would sound and look on video, whether they would be engaging, if
Yeah.
they would be engaging
Watch
through
out. Yeah.
that. So I just performed a really short because I think it couldn't be longer than 2.5 minutes or something like that. And so I just
Right.
performed short poems and then submitted that. And then they contacted me, the students who were a part of the review, they contacted me and asked me to submit a longer proposal. And so then that's when I came up with the Let Hearts Love, Let Hearts Live. And then
Yeah.
there was a written portion for that application, and then I think after that, they wanted to be able to do like an interview, which this was, some of this was still being conducted during the pandemic. So then a lot of that was done over Zoom. And
Okay.
so it was and then once they actually confirmed that they had selected me to be a part of the TEDx talk, then they connected
Yeah.
me with another student who was a former student of mine who was a part of that
That's
TEDx
crazy.
to be my coach. And so I met with him like every couple of weeks or whatever to kind of go over what my plan was,
Oh
and
wow.
if he felt like he
Yeah.
needed to give feedback, that kind of stuff. So that's basically what that process involved.
Wow. So from submission of the proposal to execution of the actual pieces, what was that? About 6 months, or was it a little shorter than that?
I think it was about six
Wow.
months, but it did get delayed a bit.
Okay.
They had originally wanted it to be in March of that year, but then it got pushed back till May. So I think
Okay.
that the entire process was probably close to 6 months.
Oh, it's good to know it's an extensive and calculated process. Really cool. And
Mhm.
yeah, and I just quickly wanted to go into some of the pieces that you did. And so first, I love the intro, and I'm a dude that really enjoys lyrics. And so, you mentioned you talk about concepts of transphobia, homophobia are foreign to you. You don't understand how someone can or refuses to see them as someone's mother, father, daughter, son. I'm like, oh man, she's awesome. And then you go into your poems. And so the first one you did was Notes from the Underground, Remembering Vincent Chin. When do we cease to be a people? At what point does conscious collapse so that we fail to remember ourselves before we swing a baseball bat to beat death at times in the holy cow? So did you write that piece specifically for that TED Talk, or is that one that you perform quite frequently?
That's a poem that I perform quite frequently. I actually wrote that originally in 2002. So I wrote that poem as a part of I was involved with remembrance events for the 20th anniversary of Vincent Chin's murder. And prior to that, going out to Detroit in June of 2002 for those remembrance events. Asian Arts Initiative had this, at that time, had this program called the Artist Exchange Program. And since that year, 2002, was the 20th anniversary, the 20th anniversary of Vincent Chin's murder, Asian Arts Initiative's Artist Exchange Program that year was about Vincent Chin. And so I had already written a couple of other pieces that were about Vincent Chin, and I was invited to go out to participate in these remembrance events, and I was going out to perform these poems that I had written with the Asian Arts Initiative in the Asian Arts Initiative program. And then while we were out there, and so there were lots of people that were invited to be a part of these remembrance events for that weekend at the University of Michigan. And so there were lots of artists, there were lots of activists, there were local, national, and so forth. And one of the last things that we did was we went to the gravesite where Vincent Chin is
Oh wow.
buried. And the other really sad part of that was his mother, Lily Chin, had just passed away 2 weeks before those remembrance
Oh
events.
man.
So when we went to the prayer vigil at the gravesite, it was not only visiting Vincent Chin's grave, but also his mother, Lily Chin, who was buried next to him. And so that poem was written to, and that's the way the poem opens up. Remember, I've been using this word a lot lately, but I wonder if I've been using it right. And that's because at the no, those are the opening lines of the poem, and that's because that's what the the pastor, right, and the rabbi and the imam, right, that they had there, because they had representatives from various religions that led various aspects of this prayer vigil. And that was like the refrain. That was what they kept repeating. Like it's important because these were remembrance events, right? So it was like remember, remember, remember. And it was just something that it just kept coming, not only because I kept hearing it being said, but something in me just started. I have to write a poem about this. And so that poem opens up with just my observations about this prayer vigil. But then I think that, as the poem goes on, what the poem becomes about is all of the ways in which we as human beings dehumanize other human beings, right? Where we don't recognize another person as being someone's loved one, as being someone
Sure.
who only mainly just wants to be able to, have whatever it is, follow our dreams, right? To find the people we love, to take care of the people we love, right? So forth and so on. That to remember that we have more in common than we have differences. But the ultimate question is, like you had pointed out, like at what point does conscience collapse or fail to
Yeah.
redeem? So, like, what makes a person like snap in a moment where
Right.
they refuse to see someone as a human being, and then they kill them, right? So then, starting with Vincent Chin, and then over the years I've added different instances of where that has happened. You know what I mean? Both
Sure.
in terms of things that have happened in the United States, but then also things that have happened internationally. And so it's really a plea for us to recognize our common humanity,
Yeah.
and so that's why I opened up that Let Hearts Love, Let Hearts Live. I think that at that particular time when I was planning that TED Talk, it was because there were just so many mass shootings. I mean, they still are, right? There still are mass shootings, but the murder of George Floyd and all of these other instances that happened, the anti-Asian violence that us.
Right. At that time.
Yes, at that time. And then, of course, mass shootings and young people being terrified to go to school when school should be a safe space for
Sure.
them. And so that's kind of what motivated me to want to do that TEDx talk around those themes and to open up with that poem. Yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, and I love your use of the word remember and just creating awareness in general. I think it's important, and so I think it's very powerful. And then your next piece, you talk about uh, your ancestry, your Korean ancestry, right? So your poems, your worship. That's something that I also love about you is that you always go back and remember both sides of where you're from, and you do frequently shout out Korean heritage, mother, and so I love that. That just hey, really what hit me, what specific line was when you talk about every day we walk with our ancestors. They are in our DNA. They speak to us in our hearts. So I love the cadence too in that piece. But can you just talk to me on why you do that?
I think it's very important for us to remember that there are countless, I mean, generations upon generations upon generations of family and ancestors that made it possible for us to be here. I often try to like when I perform that piece, I try to tell people I was like, I don't know if we really think about this, but it's really a miracle that we're here. It's a miracle that we as the individual that we are, the person that we are, right? That we are here because we're talking about there we had to have ancestors that were walking this earth 500 years ago, 1,000
Sure.
years ago, 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. I mean, human beings have supposedly been on this earth for over 100,000 years, maybe even up to 300,000 years ago. And so for all of us here, we had to have an ancestor that goes back. And I don't think that we really can fathom that, right? Like who that ancestor could have been and
Sure.
what they looked like and how they might have lived and what did the world look like then. I mean the last ice age ended 10,000 years ago, right? We had ancestors that walked this planet during the ice age. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I mean I think if we really think about it like that, I think we would have more gratitude over the life that we're able to live today
Yeah.
because we wouldn't be able to live this life if it weren't for the ancestors that came before us. I mean, just simply our parents and the sacrifices that our
Right.
parents, even something as close to us as that, sometimes we don't consider as much as we should. Do you know what I'm saying? But then to
Yeah.
think about like what our other ancestors might have had to have gone through as well, I
Yeah.
think is important for us, as I said, because I think that it's so important to have that gratitude and to put our own lives here into some kind of context. And I think, this is something that I've also found inspiring in terms of learning about certain like indigenous traditional belief systems. Like
Yeah.
many indigenous peoples, they think about the generation seven, 7 generations behind us. You know what I
Okay.
mean? What can we do now to prepare for my descendants 7 generations? And I feel like we all should be doing that.
Yeah. Good point.
What is it that we can be doing now to to think about how we can, set up a life for them on this planet or whatever
Yeah.
that, in 200 years that my ancestors, I mean, my descendants could still benefit from. So I think that's really, and I think it's important to remember that and pay, homage to our ancestors.
Yeah, I agree. You do it, from all the way back to, as you mentioned, your parents, and you remember them quite often, and you have some lovely things that you say, social media, and even like I believe your mom's name, right? Your daughter's name. Did you give your daughter your mom's name?
My oldest daughter's name,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool. Even by that act too, I was like, that's a tribute to those before you. And so I thought again, that's something that I love that you remember that. And remind us to look back, and then again, what are we doing to prepare for forward? So very cool. And then you close that TED Talk too with Hello World. Again,
Yeah.
wow, I wonder what the trouble's really worth. I'll just listen to the earth and ponder this verse. No, my self worth is a never ending search for discovery of the deepest parts of me. So I love it. Just always trying to recreate yourself to be the best person that you can be. But I hear in your own words what that about.
I mean, well, first of all, I have to give a shout out to SNRG, which I don't know
Okay.
if you're familiar with SNRG, but that is
No.
so they're a hip hop group as well, right? Two
Oh, okay.
Filipino brothers, and
Ah.
they're based in the Virginia area,
Mm-hmm.
and is inspired by a song that they have called "Hello World."
Ah, I
Yes.
need to listen. I'll need to listen to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the one brother who is the one who does that song, right? Who is the MC on that song is I Speak. And so that song has some and during some of my lowest points in my life has like really helped me to pull myself up, from my bootstraps, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Help me pick
Sure.
up. And so because I was so inspired by that song, I wanted to write my own version of it. And
Oh, wow.
so that's the inspiration for my piece called Hello World. And I think that for me, what I wanted to be able to do is acknowledge, well, first of all, I want to acknowledge I'm not perfect. I mean, I'm not, I definitely have ways in which I still struggle.
Sure.
I have insecurities, but there are also ways in which I recognize that sometimes the struggles and insecurities that I have are because of outside or external influences that are imposing certain things onto me, right?
Yeah.
So that I feel like I'm not worthy or I feel like an imposter or I feel, you know what I mean? Especially as someone who identifies as being biracial or mixed race, right? So I think that part of this piece is about me reclaiming self and reclaiming pride in self, recognizing my own inner strength, and also acknowledging that there will always be obstacles and there's always going to be a part of me that is that angry Asian girl, but I can also again appreciate and be grateful for the life that I have and the opportunities that I have, the people who are in my life, all my loved ones, right? And so it's both an acknowledgement of what I've gone through and how I still struggle, but then also the moving forward. Like we just have to keep moving forward, right? And
Yeah.
if I don't believe in myself, then how can I expect anybody else to believe in me? And then
Yeah.
hopefully other people will be inspired by that message too, or it's
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, TED Talks are, famously short for a reason. And so you got through three different pieces and all very powerful, all very different themes too. And so, again, I credit you as a writer and being able to do that to connect many different levels. And so, again, I mentioned earlier that you're the whole package, right, in terms of being able to deliver and write. And so, I wanted to quickly talk about your piece in Brevity Mag. My mother calls me that you did back in 2020. And so I didn't know if stories on there were true or if you were just writing, but holy cow, that's another one that was, whoo, man, just when you read it, amazing and very powerful. Now, was that all real life experiences? And can you tell me what motivated you to write that?
Well, what motivated me to write that piece was when at the time that I wrote it, my mom was very ill, and this was written a few months before she passed away. So my mom was, as I said, very ill for many years. She had multiple myeloma, which is cancer of the blood cells, and so her blood cells, were at she was producing cancerous blood cells, which were then attacking her internal organs, which caused her to go into kidney failure. So she was in the advanced stages of kidney failure and on dialysis, which is what she eventually passed away from, was the kidney failure. And she also had thyroid cancer. And it was a poem that was, I think that for me, I started to think about as an adult watching my mom go through this pain and also recognizing the pain that my mom has lived her entire life as someone who's a survivor of the Korean War and wanting to acknowledge that fight in her, but then also recognizing that she was starting to lose that um that desire to fight. Like my mom was always a fighter, I guess is the point I'm trying to. My whole life she was a fighter. But then in those final months, I could see her letting go. And I didn't know how to like really process that. I'm sorry, I'm starting to get
Yeah.
emotional.
Oh, no,
But
it's fine.
that
Thank you.
yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to write that poem because I wanted to acknowledge that trying to process and to come to terms with seeing my mom give up the fight. But then also I wanted to again in my own way thank my mom for being my mom and for being the first person that I met in this world, just as we all are with our own mothers. So
Yeah.
even though it's kind of like a goodbye piece for my mom, but it's also kind of an origin piece for me because the poem also talks about the reason why my mom named me Michelle.
Yeah. Oh, my
Yeah.
God.
And
That
didn't
was
yeah, why she didn't give me a Korean name, right? So
right.
So it's in many there are many layers to this particular poem, but it's definitely in the end it's about my love for my mother and
Yeah, clearly.
yeah. So
Yeah, no, and yeah, you're right off that line too, where you talk about why she named you Michelle, and then the line before that where she talks, or actually you talk about, or potentially her frustration you may have begun because of her inability to say the name. Oh my God. I mean, same thing. I felt the same way when I was reading it. That's why, and that's probably this probably is the piece why I mentioned earlier that oh my God, Michelle's writing is just ridiculous, and so just very powerful. And so I love that. Just again, just all the continuous shout outs about your mom, and then your brother, right? How he was named Michael,
he
right?
was
Yeah.
yes.
So yeah, clever. She sounds like an awesome person, and yeah, and then I love the little part too where you talk about the Christmas presents, and then she writes it in Hangul so that you guys aren't able to figure out whose
And
presents
we
are what.
mhm.
Yeah, but super awesome. And shout out to your mom too. And I know her birthday is coming up January, right? And so yeah, very close. So I wanted to shout out your mom too. But again, just I appreciate your writing too. So very phenomenal. Yeah, do you write pieces frequently for magazines, or was that just something that you had and you wanted to publish and you went that way?
Yeah, I don't really remember how I submitted it to Brevity. I'm not even sure what it was exactly, but I'm just really grateful that because really, I don't even really know if they do poetry. I think that because I think that's supposed to be short fiction or not short fiction, short nonfiction. I think that's what that particular website specializes in is in short nonfiction.
Yeah,
And so it was it's weird because the poem was considered to be kind of a hybrid of being a poem but also kind of like a poetic essay, and then
yeah, sure.
that's how they accepted it, and then they published it on the website. And so I'm just really grateful to them for doing that. Honestly, I don't really seek out too many as when it comes to my poetry. I don't really have too much of a desire to publish it, even though sometimes people ask me about publishing my poetry
Yeah,
or whatever. And that's because really do believe as a performance artist or as a spoken word poet that my poetry is mostly meant to be heard or
sure.
seeing me perform it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so like for a lot of my poetry, I don't really think about submitting it. But that one, because it was for my mom, I really wanted to share that out to the world just because I want everybody to know about my mom. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
my mom was the type of person who, I think for a lot of us, right? For, our immigrant parents and so forth, they don't want to talk. You know what I mean? It's like they don't want
right.
they want things to stay quiet. They just want to keep their heads down. They want to work hard. You know what I mean? They don't want to they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to cause any waves or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They're just doing what they feel like they need to do. And so, but my mom had lived through so much, like I said, and she overcame so much. And I wanted her, to me, my mom is a hero, right? So all of
sure.
us think of her, right? And
Absolutely.
I just wanted to get her story out there as much as possible.
Yeah, I love it. And yeah, interesting that you mentioned that your stuff is meant to be performed, but yeah, as I mentioned, your writing's so powerful. I would love to see at some point your stuff in a book one day, but that's great. I'll have to catch you live one day. Amazing. It's a different experience of watching videos, how I've seen you over the years versus seeing somebody live, right?
That's so
Yeah,
true.
yeah, nothing beats that. And another thing I wanted to touch upon too is just I know you're a professor as well. You got a PhD, but you're very good at being a mentor, right? And I always think it's very important to give back to the community and to prepare the future generations, like you mentioned. And so I love too on social media, you're always hyping up your folks. Just hey, you were very proud of some of your folks who made it to the Def Jam Poetry Showcase. And I think were you part of the Drop the Mic Showcase? Is that something that you host?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm the faculty coordinator. I created this television program that we do. So I teach full time at Community College of Philadelphia.
Mhm.
I teach there part time, but I'm full time professor at Community College of Philadelphia. And I created a show there back in 2014. But I've done spoken word poetry slams at CCP long before we did this show. But I
Sweet.
the show came about because I just said to myself, everybody needs to know how great our students are. And I want to
Yeah. I love
have a,
it.
have a TV channel. And I was like, we need to get this on the TV channel. And so at that
Yeah.
time, the director of our CCP TV department, Alan Kobernick, he was really great. And we had worked with him before. My spoken word poetry club students and I had worked with him before. And so
Sure.
he really loved the idea. And so we created this show back in 2014, and we
Sure.
were nominated for 6 Emmys because of just how powerful our students' work is. And
Yeah.
but because of the pandemic, we were put on hiatus, because
Okay.
we couldn't have performances at the college, and we were
Yeah.
doing classes online. So this year, this fall semester was the first time that we had dropped the mic since the pandemic. So it'd
Oh
been
wow. All right. I'm glad it's back. Yeah.
yes, and so I always want everybody to know how great and wonderful our students are. And so yeah, I try as much as
Yeah.
possible to, to put them out there and give them their
Yeah.
props.
Yeah, I
So
love it. Yeah, you're so proud to showcase that, and I love that in you. And did they ever get to see you perform on the show too? You ever get up there and do your thing?
yes, back. Well, this season I
Good.
didn't, but in the previous seasons, I've definitely performed because in the previous seasons I hosted,
Yep.
but this season I didn't want to host. I actually had a couple of my alumni poets
Yeah.
host, and then I decided to be a judge, so I'm like the head judge
Yeah.
this time.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That's
which was
good.
fun. I had a great time doing it.
Yeah.
But this season I didn't perform, but I have performed in previous seasons, and I even had Kathy come on the show
Oh, super cool. Yeah.
together, and she did a solo set and
Yeah.
everything. So
Yeah. Is she in Philly too? Are you guys
yeah,
co? Yeah, fantastic.
Philly.
Okay. Well, cool. Hey, well, and then you are a very busy person, and I love it. Always doing something cool, and you yourself are also a podcaster too, and so you got some shows going on. Do you want to tell me what motivated you to put the Mind Your Margins podcast together?
That was actually something that was suggested to me by my oldest daughter, Myung.
Nice.
Yeah, so basically, I will say that, I mean, I just because I always try to be honest. After my mom passed away, I had a really hard time like getting
Sure.
back in feeling motivated about doing anything, right? And I think that for my children, they were trying to find the passion for me again. They were trying to encourage me because they're honestly, I did go through this period after my mom passed away, and then my dad also passed away 2 years ago, that I really didn't want to perform anymore. Like I got to this
Oh
point,
wow.
I actually wanted to give up poetry. I didn't want to write poetry. I didn't want to perform poetry. I didn't want to do any of that. I had no energy for any of that at all. And I think my kids were a little worried that I didn't
Mm.
hire anymore and that I seem to be content just sitting around and just not really doing anything. And so I think that this my daughter was trying to find a way to light that fire.
Oh
And
man.
and so she suggested that I do a podcast. And at first I was kind of like, I don't want to do it. And she was
Yeah.
like, all you have to do is just come up with what you want to talk about and
Yeah.
record your and I'll take care of the rest. So my daughter,
She's
yeah,
great. Oh
yeah,
man.
this is the whole thing. I really don't take any credit for it. The only thing I do, like I said, is I think about what I want to talk about, and then I record myself, and then I just give it to her. She's created everything, like the
Wow.
graphics for it, like putting it out there. She edits it. She does everything. She just put it on YouTube. I don't know. She told I have to get with what she's doing because she's always like working on it and doing stuff with it, and
She's
I
great.
I I have a hard time keeping up with her. So that's
Yeah.
how that's how the podcast came about.
Yeah, hey, I love it. I'm well into the first one, but just I love the topics that you talk about. First one was more introductory and why you're doing what you're doing, but some of the other ones are very important topics, right? Violence against AAPI women, women supporting women fight for reproductive health care, and just really great. I just love that you're a busybody and you're always doing something. And I saw that in June last year you interviewed Charles Yu, author of the book Interior Chinatown. And I was trying to figure out, is that the show that just came out on Hulu?
That's the same
Oh man, I was like, dude,
book.
this is
Yeah.
wild. Yeah. So how
Yeah,
was that? How was that experience?
he was really great. I enjoyed interviewing him. So basically, we
Uh-huh.
have this thing that we are the library in Philadelphia, the Free Library of Philadelphia. They do this
Yeah.
program called One Book, One Philadelphia, where
Okay.
they pick a book and then they want the entire city of Philadelphia to read it.
Huh.
And so,
Oh,
so
that's super
that,
cool.
yeah, so that year,
Yeah.
2023 was Interior Chinatown. And
Wow.
so actually, it's really interesting how because originally I was not a part of any of the planning or coordinating for the One Book, One Philadelphia. And
Okay.
Community College Philadelphia had always had some kind of partnership with the Free Library to bring the One Book, One Philadelphia programming to the college.
Yeah.
Well, my colleague at CCP, Professor Cherise Shane,
Okay.
invited because since it was Interior Chinatown, she felt as though I should be the one to interview Charles Yu, which I think
Nice.
was so gracious and generous of her
Okay.
because she would have been amazing interviewing him too. But she
Yeah.
invited me to be the one to interview him. And so I really have to, give a lot of credit and also express my gratitude to my colleague, Sharice Shane, for inviting me to do that. And so he was, like I said, Charles Yu was really great.
Yeah.
I enjoyed talking to him. It was funny though, there was this one point where I asked him this question and because I'm an English professor, right? So he was like, "Oh my God." He said, I got a little worried there because it sounded like it was an essay question. I have to answer in essay format. And I was like, "Oh no, I'm sorry. It's the English professor." So he was great. Like as far as the way he answered the questions, I
Yeah.
mean, in terms of talking about the complexity of the book itself, but then
Yeah.
also answered with such humor and really was very open as because we had like a huge turnout, like a huge public turnout
I can
that came
imagine.
yeah, to come see and hear him for talk about the book. And he was just really wonderful in terms of relatability and in terms of how he interacted, not only like in my interview with him, but for the people who asked him
Yeah.
questions. We'd have a Q&A session afterwards. So he was just really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So I just found out. Did you know already that they were making a show? Must have been
I
maybe
believe he
2023.
talked about
Yeah.
I
Okay.
believe he did. I think he mentioned it during the interview that it
Yeah.
was being a show. Yeah. And then I saw the trailer for it like
I
recently.
know.
Oh, wow, that's yeah.
Right. And so it was a show that is on like top of my list to go watch. And I didn't realize it was a book until, I was preparing for this interview. And so now I'm like, I'm gonna hold off on the show and just read the book first and then yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
then
yeah.
is that interview posted somewhere? Did you guys actually document the interview? I would love to see the interview too.
I believe that the free library posted the audio to that interview on their website somewhere, but I'm not completely
Yeah,
certain of.
fantastic. Well, I'm talking to the interviewer herself, so very cool. That was great. Well, good. Hey, and then just accolades after accolades. Hey, earlier this year you were awarded with the 2024 Live Back Distinguished Teaching Award at Community College of Philly, demonstrating excellence in teaching, and then you got the fellowship from New Jersey State Council on the Art, and I believe the project you're doing is for that book, right? Talk Me a Story, Moon Rabbit. And so
Yes.
I would love to hear that just a little piece on how that came about and where you're at. I'm tracking that you're polishing, the final touches on the book, and I would love to hear when that book is coming out.
Yeah, so I'm so excited about this book. So just like with so much of the work that I do, I was motivated to write this book because I wanted to honor my mother. And I think for this book, what I really wanted to honor was my mom. didn't consider herself to be an artist. I mean, she and I would, for much of my life, because I considered myself to be an artistic, creative type person, but
Yeah.
she thinks practical, right? So we would like my whole life we butted heads. She hated that I like the Deaf Poetry Jam performance of Catsy and
Oh,
me. She hated our well, I mean, I'm not going to say she hated Catsy's performance. She hated my performance.
oh,
That
mom.
it's like a profanity. It was a big profanity thing, right? She was like, "Why did you have to go on TV and curse so much?" Like,
Mom
I
being
can't even
mom.
tell her. Yeah, she was like, "I can't even tell our family in Korea that you were on TV." All this stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, so it was always a bit of a point of conflict between me and her. But I think like
Yeah.
in the last few years of her life, I think that she understood that it must have been important because I mean, Katsy and I were performing all over, and then I was doing like a solo thing, and I was going all over the country and stuff. And I think she realized then that, oh, people really want to hear what Michelle has to say, so it must be important. So I think that
Sure.
towards the end of her life, she was proud of me for that. But I think that the one thing that I wish that my mom had realized, and I wish that I had said this to her, was that she's an artist too. Like my mom loved to sew, and that was a form of creativity. That was a form of
Yeah.
creative expression. But my mom also loved to tell stories. Like it's the talk story, the Asian American talk story. And so she would talk story all the time. And to me, my love of storytelling and when she told stories, like she was like big voice and big gestures. So there was the performance element too, like when
Yeah,
she,
there you go.
you know, and even like I've been talking recently about like my memories of when she first taught me how to sing arirang, the Korean folk song that all
Yeah.
Korean people, or whatever. And when the first time she taught me to sing it, like everything was so big and exaggerated, how she sang it. And so I think that for me, writing this book was important because I wanted to honor my mom as a storyteller and as the
Love
first
it.
story in my life. And so that's what this book is about. Talk Me a Story About Moon Rabbit is a middle grade novel
Yep.
where the character Shelley basically she goes through struggles in terms of being teased at school and being afraid of the dark and having all of these other fears around how people perceive her and not feeling as though she belongs. And what she finds solace in are the Korean folk tales that her mom tells her.
Yeah.
And and so it basically takes Shelley on this journey where her favorite folk tale that her mom tells her is of Moon Rabbit.
Sure.
And but then one night Moon Rabbit actually slides down from the moon and jumps on her bed and steals her family's rice from the kitchen from their kitchen. And then so she chases Moon Rabbit to the moon, and
Oh,
and then
that's awesome.
she goes on a whole journey to the moon. And so that's basically how the story begins, but it's really an homage to my mom as a
Love it.
storyteller. And then I did want to acknowledge too that I think that what I discovered in writing this book is that this book is also a kind of it's like a love letter of sorts to my inner child because I had always wanted to be since I was a child, and my mom was the first person to read me children's books. Those were the only kinds of books she could read to me, right? So my earliest memories of my mom reading me children's books, and I would
Yeah.
like my own books out of construction paper and staple them and say, oh, I'm gonna write my own book one day, and stuff. But somewhere along the line you lose that, right? You lose that dream for whatever reasons. And
Yeah.
now it was kind of me rediscovering that dream. And so I think that there was also it's kind of like a love letter to my inner child. Like we're finally following this dream, of writing a book. So yeah.
Yeah, I look forward to the release of the book. Yeah, and I love the audio sample that you have online too as well. So yeah, it's a good just intro of what to expect when this book comes out. Did you mention was it going to come out in 2025 or what are you targeting for its release?
So actually, this past week, I just talked to my writing coach. And so
Okay.
basically, what I was trying to decide was, did I want to try to self-publish this or did I want to query it out to publishers? And so
Okay.
she's encouraging me to query it out to publishers. And so it's just going to be as far as that process. Because
Okay.
if it was something that I was just going to do myself, then I would have it out in the next couple months, you know. But
Right.
if I'm gonna query it out to publishers, then it's just gonna be me submitting to that process, you know,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. And just you what kind of way. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm gonna keep my
Cool.
fingers crossed. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. I mean, whew, so many awesome things going on. And I'm trying to wonder like where she has the free time to do anything cool. But everything you're doing is cool. And so what do you do for fun outside of all these amazing things that you do?
Basically, what I do for fun is I like to watch television shows. That's my big thing is
Oh,
television
all right.
and anime. Like my kids
Ah,
gotten me into anime.
nice.
So recently my son and I have caught up on all of the episodes of Demon Slayer. So
Awesome. Very cool.
super excited about that, right? So that was my big thing was I have to catch up on Demon Slayer.
Okay.
And and then the other one that we enjoy watching that we have to still catch up on is My Hero Academia. I don't know if you
Okay.
watch it or anything,
I
but
no, I don't, but I'm familiar with the title, so very cool. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Yeah, so that's what I do, like because I need something where I can just watch it. You know, it
yeah,
has to be something that stimulates me, but at the same time, like stimulates my mind, but at the
yeah.
same time, you know, I can also kind of veg out. You know,
Right, right.
I need both of those things
You just
happening in
enjoy it.
balance. So so I just watched The Penguin and
Oh, yeah, that's another show that's out. Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. I watched the finale for that last week, and then I also just started the new one, the Dune Prophecy
Okay.
series. Yeah,
Very
and
cool.
then there's another one on Apple TV, the second season of Silo. I don't know if you watch these shows. So this is what I
Okay.
do. Like I binge watch like lots of different shows, and then
Yeah.
as far as like other things that I enjoy, I really do enjoy going out into nature.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah, because I think that especially when I travel and I go to different parts of the country, you know, this past summer I was able to travel pretty extensively. You know, I hadn't traveled like that since you know, for a while. And I got to see, you know, certain, like I went to the Great Salt Lake and, you know, went out into the desert. And every time I travel, I try to go out into nature and just kind of get to know just in a small kind of way, like what the earth is like in that area. And
Yeah.
I think you know, I want to be able to experience the earth and
Yeah.
appreciate the beauty of this earth as much as I can. And so that's the other thing is like just going out into nature.
It's awesome. I spend a lot of time doing the same, but with Korean dramas.
Oh, okay.
Did you ever get into that stuff or no? Is it mostly
I actually do love Korean dramas and I've been wanting to get back into it. I
Mhm.
got the whole DVD set for Winter Sonata
Oh, I
and
haven't seen that one.
oh, that's like one of the first ones like that's the one that kind of started a lot of people
Yeah. Yeah.
journey. And so
Uh-huh.
I was like, I need to go watch the classic. I need to watch Winter Sonata. And so
Okay.
I had, like I said, I actually, you know, it's old school, right? I have to like the DVD. I got the DVDs.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I still buy
I do
CDs, so
my CDs too. I still listen. My kids think I'm crazy, but I'm like, no, I got stuff on my CD. So
oh
yeah.
man.
Yeah, but there are definitely a few K dramas that I love to watch too. Yeah.
Hey, that's awesome. And so, hey, thank you. It was really an honor to go into everything that you've done and into your work. And we didn't even touch what you have to do. And I hope to do that at a later time. But it was just really an honor to do a deep dive. And I usually like to close these interviews with some lighthearted questions. So if you're ready, I'm gonna put you under the gun. See how you do on these fun questions. Are you
Okay.
ready?
I guess
All right,
so.
we'll start with a softball. Here's a little
Okay.
softball question for you. All right, you said that you were half Korean. What is your favorite Korean food?
My favorite Korean food is kimchi jjigae.
Oh, good choice. Yeah, I love it.
I
Do you
always
make
know
Korean
the
food?
recipe. Yes, yes, I do. I don't get to
Nice.
cook it as much as I want, and my kids have been asking me. I think this holiday I will be cooking more Korean food, but
Okay.
I actually judge how good a restaurant is by their kimchi jjigae, a Korean
Yeah,
place by their kimchi jjigae. Because if they can't make good kimchi jjigae, then it's
I'm
like
out.
no.
All right, great. Hey, great job with that one. Okay, here's your next question. Is it okay to save a parking spot by standing in it?
Yes, yes, I do think it is okay. I have
It's
done
fair,
that.
huh?
I have made my kids do that, so I do.
Okay, all right. Hey, fill in the blank. I hate it when.
I hate it when people beep at me and they don't know how to effing drive. I yelled at some guy just yesterday for beeping at me, and I was like, we're at a red light where there is a red light camera, and you're beeping at me because I didn't go through the red light. Like it's ridiculous stuff like that. So that's my biggest thing right now that I hate is there are too many people on the road who don't know how to drive. I'm sorry. I went on and started
Hey,
venting.
no, I think that's a great answer. I do the same too. All right. Hey, answer the question. Here's a complex question. Who let the dogs out?
Who let the dogs out? I just want to go. When you ask me that question, I just want to go woof 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 woof. I just want to finish the song.
I had to test that question out. I was like, I wonder how this will do. Let me see. And you answered it perfectly. I don't think anyone can answer it better than you did.
I appreciate that.
All right. Oh, that's great. All right. And here's my closing question for you. Have you ever had a celebrity crush and who was it?
Oh my goodness. You know what? I think that I have to say right now that for some reason, the only person that is popping into my head as far as like a celebrity crush is Keanu Reeves, and
Okay. Hey.
don't know why Keanu Reeves is popping into my head, but I think that I have enjoyed watching Keanu Reeves's journey
All
over the
right.
years. You know what I mean? So yeah, and I recently noticed how gray he's getting. And I was thinking to myself, yep, Keanu's getting up there, or whatever. We all are, right?
Yeah.
But I don't
He
know.
ages well.
I think he has aged well,
Yeah.
and so I'll have to just put Keanu Reeves out there as someone that I can
That's a good
identify.
way to stamp the end. Well, thank you again. You were, as I mentioned, a phenomenal writer. I love you as an artist, and great point, right? Sometimes we don't see ourselves as artists because we're not doing the traditional things like rapping, writing poetry, or doing art. But it's an art in everything that you do, right? Just like your mom. But again, just I love everything that you do. I'm a big fan, and just super happy that I got to go into dive with you about your work, the books that you're writing, the pieces that you're delivering, and so on. So thank you for your time. Any special projects that you want to tell folks about before we close? Is there one that we did not mention? And I'd love for you just to share with the people the best place to find your work. Where do you want them to go if they're looking for Will Myers' work?
As far as projects, I think the biggest one for me is the middle grade novel that I'm working on, Talk My
Yeah.
Story. I've just been putting all of my heart and my energy, my soul, my time, everything, into that. And I hope that people will keep an eye out for that. As far as where people can keep track of me, they can keep track of me. Well, I do have my website, which is just michellemyerspoet.com.
Yep.
And I am on Instagram and Facebook. So mixed underscore Asian underscore mama underscore, and mama is MAMA. And then on Facebook, I don't even know what I am on Facebook. I think Michelle Myers. I'm not really sure. Cassie tells me I have a weird thing on Facebook. I don't pay attention. I'm just like, if people find me, they find me. But
Yeah.
I am on Facebook too. So yeah, and I try. I'm not as good as far as like sharing out. Like I don't share out like every single day, but I do try to update as much as possible. So yeah, that's where people can.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. With that, I would like to leave the final word to you. Any other final words before we close this interview?
I just wanted to say it was such an honor to be able to be here to talk with you today, and I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right.
It's such a great experience and being such a wonderful interviewer. Thank you so much. And
Oh, thank you.
thank you for all the work that you do as well. Thank you for being, so amazing in your own way. So thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'll keep in touch as we get this out, but I really look forward to getting this out. So with that, thank you again. I will stay in touch and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too.